Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to this community showdown. It's going to be Charix with the forces of Tzeentch facing off against Lydon with the Dwarves here on the Lost Temple of Tzeentch. So let's go ahead and break down these builds and have some fun. For the forces of Tzeentch, it looks like it's going to be an elite infantry build, actually. So we have a couple of Chaos Warriors on the wings, but the real epicenter of the build, the real money, is going to be the Chosen of Tzeentch. Now, of course, these guys do lack armor piercing. Pretty much all sword and board infantry do, but they have crazy staying power with 120 armor, 60 melee defense, regenerating shields. They're going to be able to sit and grind with Dwarvish infantry, and most likely, if nothing else interferes, come out on top in that duel. So it's just going to be a very grindy Tzeentch build looking for that long-term value. So yeah, just Chaos Warriors, a couple blues out on the wings, and up in the sky we do have an Exalted Lord of Chicken, and he is going to be coming in with what spells? Infernal Gateway, yes. So this is just a high armor piercing vortex. You know, if you can shut down the Dwarven shooting, like the Rangers, Thunders, whatever, using this spell, then the Chosen of Tzeentch should be able to trade very well into most of the Dwarven troopers. I mean, not in terms of like raw damage output, in terms of grinding and staying power. Now, looking at the forces of the Dowie, one of my favorite color schemes, the Ancestral, I think it's Grombrindles, if I'm not mistaken. But we got Belegar and Felix. All right, interesting combo. Belegar, of course, very, very tanky for his price point. 120 armor, pretty good combat stats, and also hits hard with the Hammer of Angren, over 500 weapons rank. So against like demons, he can certainly do some good work. He might struggle a little bit against armor, but Felix does have good armor piercing and also provides a little bit of healing to him, so that's pretty neat for sure. Now the rest of the army is going to be blasting charges, backed up by Rangers with great weapons, which is actually going to be very clutch here. Not only do they have armor-piercing throwing axes, but if they do get forced into melee versus some of the Tzeentch warriors, they're going to have some armor-piercing of their own in that particular fight. Couple warriors on the outside, and that is it. So we'll do a little bit of fast-forwarding while the two armies posture up in position. The objectives will be opening up here very, very soon. And we see the chicken looking for his prize, so it's currently just kind of glancing about, looking for its sweet drumstick. Maybe you're going to be dropping a vortex on those Rangers. Probably not. For now, I'm just going to pull back. And, you know, a very good tactic to do with the big chicken is you attack into something, right? So you attack Ultharge Raiders in melee, and then the Slayers are going to come and try and stop you. And then you can drop the Vortex on top of yourself, which is going to hit the Slayers as well as the Ultharge Raiders and protect your big bird. So yeah, it definitely works well. Dwarves with a little bit of split push here. We got Miners coming on objective 1 here. A couple blasting charges and Iron Drakes. Oh, Skolder Guard coming out. That's very exciting. These things certainly pack a punch against armor if they can sit and shoot, but I've always had weird line of sight issues with them. I find that they just kind of struggle to shoot, but maybe you guys have had a little bit more success than I have. Nonetheless, the Dwarves doing what Dwarves do, just kind of hunkering down on objectives and saying, come at me, and this is a pretty decent dwarf map. It's okay and all, but it also has some issues with the line of sight. There's a lot of trees, a lot of obstruction, so traditional dwarven cannons, missiles are going to be losing a lot of their DPS against the tree lines for sure. So Demon's going to be getting poked, but not before they drop a little bit of firepower onto the Dwarf Warriors here. Belegar and Felix hiding in the trees, probably waiting to ambush on some of these Chosen of Tzeentch as soon as they get in position. And here we got the big chicken taking advantage of the fact that the Dwarves are much slower and looking to do some split pushing. And here comes a Portal Glyph summon. So Portal Glyph summons a unit of Furies. They're unmarked, so they don't have the mark of their respective god when they're summoned, but even still, it's going to give some nice DPS. And the Warriors have now advanced. Blasting charges coming in, looking very, very cool, but unfortunately, looking cool isn't going to be enough in this case. Rule of Cool is very powerful, but it's not going to be solving this problem, as these Chaos Warriors are just going to butcher these Dwarven chaff units in combat. Fury's being used to shut down the Thunders. Thunders were called in most likely to shoot the big chicken, and the big chicken's going to continue hustling and chasing down the Skolder Guard. Looking on the side objective, looking like it's pretty good for the Dowie. They got a full blasting charge salvo on those Chosen. Looks like the Chosen are pulling back and going to let their shields regenerate, and the other demons of Tzeentch here are going to be getting crumbled down by the mighty Dowie. The heroes of the old world getting in there, Felix Jaeger and Belegar, who they actually do meet in the books. In the very first book, well, I think it's the first book, Gotrek and Felix go to Carrick Apex actually, and they meet Belegar there, but yeah, I can't remember. There was something weird with it where they like retconned Belegar's character after that book, and it's all sorts of you know, old deep lore there. Now, Chaos Knights of Tzeentch looking to press into the backfield. Skolder Guard, are they going to be able to get any shots off? Nope, they're just going to be turning and trying to shoot those Furies off, and we do get 2 gun units, but man, that chicken dropping the big sick beats on those Thunders. He waited for them to get summoned in, and then he just dropped a huge nuke on them because that's a pretty good anticipation. Most Dwarf players are going to be summoning in a gun piece to defend their back lines, especially a Thunder, because it's very good at ambushing and has good stopping. Oh my god, that was brutal! He got them right as they came out, and now they're just fully shattered. What a good cast. And the other Thunder is going to be chasing to the Shadow Realm, as some of the Dwarf Slayers are now peeling back here to try and stop these Chaos Knights. Now back on objective number 1, looks like the Dowie are still holding on to it. Their infantry, of course, losing horribly. Like I said, these Miners getting smashed by the Chaos Warriors. Despite the fact that the Chaos Warriors don't have the best AP, the stat differential is just too big. 38 and 46, comparing that against 20 and 18. Yeah, very, very poor stat line in those units. They're good for their blasting charges and the fact that they're cheap, but not a whole lot else. Now, Dwarves, they do hunker down here, and they are able to take Objective 3, currently holding a 2 cap against Tzeentch. We do see the Tzeentchian Chosen getting routed back. So the fancy Chosen did not have a good time versus Felix Jaeger as well as Belegar. Plus, we did also have the Ulthar Raiders there, throwing those sweet armor-piercing throwing axes. Most likely used the mark by Ulthar, so those Chosen really did not pay for themselves. On that side, at least. Over here, what do we got? It looks like it's going to be Chaos Warriors versus the Minor Troops, and the Chosen of Tzeentch here probably having a slightly better time. Looks like the unit stretched a little bit thin, trying to push through and get on top of the range pieces, but the Dwarven DPS is certainly kicking into overdrive. 3,100 against 2,000 for Tzeentch. So despite the fact that Tzeentch had a relatively nice play back here and was able to put some pressure on the backfield, they do finally wrestle this objective, though, from the Dwarves. The Dwarves still are maintaining that value lead. So another Vortex is going to be going down, and the Dwarf player, a little bit of unfortunate positioning here. He does manage to react at the last second, but the Ulthar Raiders going to get pounded by that big Vortex, and that is going to be sending those Dwarves back to the Ancestor Gods. That is for sure. They're not going to be enjoying that one. Chaos Warriors moving up, going to be trying to press this objective now that some of the ranged assets have been shut down. And Chaos Knights aren't like a terrible choice against Dwarves. I really like Tzeentch Chaos Knights. I've always felt that the regenerating shields gives them a lot of potential for, maintaining their health over the course of the game. They can engage when their shields go down, they can pull back, they can cycle charge a little bit. They certainly have some cool tools. I mean, honestly, I feel like Chaos Knights are underrated in a couple matchups in general. But yeah, there are times where you pay 1,500 gold and they do nothing, but then there's times where they're like a really disruptive presence. Now, this is the old school answer against armor that we saw from Tzeentch when Game 3 first came out in the Dark Ages. Spawn of Tzeentch have armor sundering, so it synergizes very well with the Chaos Knights, actually, because it's going to be putting the armor of these various dwarf units down to 30 and 10, depending on what you're looking at, and certainly paying some big dues. Now, Tzeentch has managed to wrestle objective number 1, but the Dwarves are mustering a force. So we have the Skolder Guard shooting in here using their steam cannons, which is super cool. A little bit of range firepower from the other ones there are going to be punishing. But yeah, these warriors are going to get melted pretty hard by this firepower. Looking at their HP, they're going down pretty quickly. And the other Chosen are going to be following up shortly after, I would imagine. Yeah, that's actually some really respectable DPS from the Skolder Guard. Pretty cool. Maybe a little bit of a forbidden tech, huh? Almost 1,000 value. I mean, they got chased heavily in the early game, and they somehow found a way to survive. Chaos Warriors here, battling against Slayers. Slayers, of course, will be able to win it, considering the Chaos Warriors are so low. But now Tzeentch looks like they're making a play for the side objective, trying to take advantage of the fact that the Dwarves really do struggle to be everywhere at once. The Dwarves do still have a bit of a value lead, but there is some healing on the Tzeentch roster with their shield, so you have to kind of take that into account here. In the backfield, Chaos Knights running pretty rampant, chasing down a lot of dwarf units. Also, something else you have to take into account when you're looking at value is units running off the battlefield. So, oftentimes if a unit runs off the battlefield, it's going to be gone out of the state of the battle, but the current value isn't going to be measured up here on the gold value. So there are some deceiving variables that you can run into. Now, objective number 1, how we looking? It looks like Tzeentch desperately trying to hold on to it, but the combination of the Skolder Guard and the rest of the Dwarfs here, able to get some beautiful stopping power. This is a really fun game so far. It feels very close. Granted, Tzeentch a little bit behind on value, but they do have a triple cap on the Dwarves now, and Tzeentch is pretty good at kind of swarming on things. They do have some decent flying pressure. Sometimes you'll see Tzeentch players use Screamers in this matchup just for the armor piercing, but in this case, I think Furies are going to be fine. Furies actually trade very well with Slayers, because Slayers have an anti-large bonus, so they don't really connect with the Furies as well. I mean, they still will cut them to pieces, but it's not the worst trade. So Furies being used as a bit of a distraction here, diving at all the range tools, and the Skolder Guard taking some damage. Bugman's Rangers, or just basic Rangers here, going to start getting worn down. And now the Dwarves calling in the big guns, baby. The organ guns of the Dowie Empire are here. But the Changer of Ways, he knew it was coming the entire time, summons his portal glyph, and the Chaos Fury is going to be coming to try and shut this down, as the organ gun trooper is going to be trying to run away. But yeah, it's going to be a rough pick here. Unless the Dwarf player has enough to get some Slayers back here or something to really peel off these Furies, losing an organ gun piece like this. Honestly, I felt as if the Dwarves were doing pretty good in the value department. Maybe we're going to be able to kind of resecure some points and get that advantage going again, but this is a pretty catastrophic blunder back here. Losing the Thunders and losing the organ gun is really devastating. I mean, that's almost like 2,000 gold worth of stuff that just gets routed by the single charge of the Exalted Lord of Change, right? So objective retaken by the Dwarves. On the far side, we do see objective number 3, which is going to be some blue horrors and the remnants of some Chaos Warriors, tar pitting Belegar as well as Felix. And eventually Belegar and Felix would be able to cut through this. Of course, Belegar with healing is pretty solid, and Felix is a good anti-infantry character, but it's going to take 10 years for that to happen. The Dwarves would certainly want to get some reinforcements over there, but it looks like they've been mostly shut down here. A lot of the units coming out of this area have been shut down by the Chaos Knights and the Flamers. It looks like they used pretty much all their ammo and did actually accrue some chevrons. Check that out. 967, Chaos Knights looking pretty erect here. 170 kills against Dwarves really isn't bad. I would wager their value is just over 1,000. Looks like it's, wow, 2,100. That's actually really good, man. Solid performance from the Chaos Knights so far. But the Dwarves still scrapping, trying to get that objective back. The organ gun did get fully routed off the battlefield, so that's got to be pretty painful. Honestly, Tzeentch probably a little bit ahead on value. considering that the Chaos Knights, or not Chaos Knights, excuse me, but the Organ Gun and Thunders probably just ran off the battlefield, even though they had a fair amount of health left. Chaos Knights look like they're going to be making a backfield charge, and the Changer of Ways has flipped this objective once again. So we see the spawn being very disruptive, and I believe there are some Slayers nearby, but it looks like the Slayer is going to be going to try and protect the guns, but that's pretty much been the story of this game, is that the Dwarves have really been having a hard time protecting their gun line, and a little bit of Last Samurai action. Fire, reload, fire, but once again, the Exalted Lord of Change, he's just been running rampant, and these Chaos Knights going to get a pretty balls deep charge here. That's going to be a devastating one, and they are the Sword and Board variant. And honestly, if you guys are looking to become Chaos Knight enjoyers, I recommend using Sword and Board in almost every situation. I just think it's better. The Lance version is cool, but oftentimes Chaos Knights are kind of like mounted chosen. You want to leave them in combat a little bit to get that grind going, and yeah, the Lance version's cool and all, but I just think Sword and Board is just better, generally speaking. So nice crossfire here. Dwarf's getting a little bit of crossfire Daka wearing down the Chaos Knights a little bit. We do get some Dwarf Warriors with great weapons making their way to the point. Tzeentch might be losing this point. There are a fair amount of Slayers. Looks like they put some hurt on the spawn of Tzeentch here, but currently it looks like the Changers getting that nice point lead here, but look at this. The Dwarves are a little bit resurgent on this side, using the Vanguard point, so they called in some Vanguard units. We have the Ultharch Raiders and some basic chaff units, and the point looks like it's going to flip. The heroes of the old world finally getting it done. Felix and I was about to say Old Grombrindle, but no, it's Belligar Ironhammer. They get the objective, it flips, but the Dwarves are going to have to get some caps pretty soon. It's getting to the point, well, it's pretty close to a single cap situation. I guess there's still a little bit of wiggle room, but yeah, they're going to have to hurry. And, you know, Dwarves, they're not about hurrying. They're a little bit more methodical. They take their time. This big chicken, man, he has been such a terror. Blasting charge is going down here. Certainly don't want to be using blasting charges on the Exalted Lord of Change, who's currently sitting at 3,200 value. Those vortexes have been brutal. And man, these Chaos Knights are still going strong back here somehow, man. They're probably up to almost 3,000 value right now. Yeah, 2,500. They're just riding around dirty with this Lord of Change and shutting down so many of the loose Dwarven shooting pieces. And obviously, Dwarven melee is pretty respectable. It's not like Grand Cathay, who's just pretty awful in melee. Like, Dwarven melee is okay. They have good offensive stats on some units, and, you know, for the price point, honestly, Dwarf Warriors don't do terribly, but yeah, like, without their shooting in range, the Dwarves really are going to be faltering against, like, Chaos tier infantry, right? So Chosen of Tzeentch making their way back and across. Looks like the Dwarves did take the objective, but once again, the Furies coming out, and yeah, Forsaken of Tzeentch also bum rushing across the map. They were able to effectively shut down the Ultharch Raiders, many of these different units, and it looks like this objective is going to be flipping to the Changer once again. And Belligar and Felix are going to have to go back to the drawing board, and the Dwarves better hurry. It's rapidly going to become a triple cap situation, and that is pretty much one of the worst situations Dwarf players can be in. I think, like, of all the factions in the game, I think Dwarves certainly aren't the worst at retaking objectives. I would probably say that that vote goes to Grand Cathay. I think Cathay just takes so long to get objectives back. Granted, Cathay can do some things Dwarves can't. They have some nice magic, which of course can do some good crowd clearing and some nice summons, and of course have some monsters and flying things. I mean, Dwarves have gyrocopters too, but even still, like, the problem is that Cathay infantry just have such pitiful killing power that they have trouble wrestling objectives from people, even if they have the advantage. It just takes some time. But over here we see the Lord of Change pulling back. A nice blasting charge volley from our Dwarven champion. It gets through the shields of the blues, and now they're going to be rushing in to try and take advantage of them being softened up. Fury's being used to shut down the Rangers, so you can notice this is a bit of a pattern here from Charix. He's just perpetually sending in these Furies onto isolated range units to make sure that the Dwarves have to fight him in melee. And now the Flamers of Tzeentch coming out once again, roasting these units, man. And every time I've seen these Flamers of Tzeentch, they've pretty much been expelling all their ammo. 718 here. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And yeah, they're probably going to be able to butter up these Rangers that are on the way in. And we're not seeing any Quarrelers, any heavy-duty range tools that can really punish them at a distance. Forsaken just chilling here, and it looks like the Chosen are battling the two heroes of the old world and doing a pretty good job of it. 61 melee defense is going to be able to hold pretty well. And the Tzeentch demons are cackling all the way to the bank, ladies and gentlemen. On the other side, we do see objective number 1. It's still owned by the Dowie. They do have some Dwarf Warriors there, but overall, unsummons coming out, Miners with Blasting Charges, and Skolder Guard being unsummoned. And here, the dreaded Miners with Blasting Charges trying to move up, but honestly, their combat stats are actually worse than these demons. So they actually probably lose that fight. I mean, they have a much lower model count. You have 160 models with better stats against these miners here. It's going to be tough. And the Chaos Knights, once again, have really been the tail of the tape, man. They have been getting in there and running through everything, breaking these positions, and just accruing value, even until death do them part here. So currently looking at their value, 2,700, which is pretty respectable. And now we're at a situation where the Dwarves have a really solid, I mean, not Dwarves, but Tzeentch has a really solid double cap on them, and I just don't think there's enough time. We're about to see the Dwarves get baited into a big vortex as well, so the Dragonback Slayers get called in, and another sweet vortex right on the face of those Dragonback Slayers. That's going to be so devastating. And yeah, Belligar and Felix, I actually didn't hate them. Like, I thought they were pretty good at grinding on a point. But really, there was just too many other things that didn't go well for the Dwarves. The Chaos Knights rampaging, the Vortexes in the backfields, all those things really added up to just be this critical massive punishment here. And now it's basically just a grind to the bitter end. So GG, well played, man. Tzeentch is going to be pulling out the W with the Chaos Knight play. That was a really cool game. And looking at the builds, I thought the Tzeentch might be in a little bit of trouble, especially after those Chosen folded on the side. But that bird put in some work with that portal glyph and those Chaos Knights, and it was able to get the job done. So GG, 2,800 on these bad boys. And overall, yeah, it was fun. We got to see the Flamers come in and do some work. And the Dwarf build was good. I think its positioning, it had some problems. I think the game really got thrown, or flipped, I should say, because it's not like he made like an awful play. He just pulled in some artillery and was shooting, but he didn't have the tools to protect it. When the Organ Gun and those Thunders got like 2 for 1 for almost no value from Tzeentch, like little effort, just 1 portal glyph and 1 charge. I think that was the big changing momentum in the game when the Dwarfs just kind of ran out of stopping power and couldn't get Tzeentch off all the points. So GG, well played. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. Let me know what matchups you want to be seeing, and I'll do my best to make them happen. And that is going to be it for tonight.